Hello, I'm Steve Bunnell with DTSC. Welcome to our SCP training series on complying with priority product regulations. See the full list of training videos on the SCP Training Materials webpage or in the YouTube description. Here we discuss the preliminary alternatives analysis. It's the first stage of SCP's two-stage alternatives analysis or AA process. In the preliminary AA, manufacturers screen a wide range of alternatives and, through a scoping and screening process, select a few viable ones to be further analyzed in the final alternatives analysis, which involves an in-depth comparison in an effort to select a safer alternative. The timeline for the two-stage AA process is approximately 2 years. Once the regulations go into effect for a priority product, the manufacturer must submit a priority product notification within 60 days, and the preliminary AA report is due within 180 days. DTSC has 60 days after receiving the preliminary AA report to review it and issue a notice of determination, which could be a notice of compliance, or a notice of deficiency or notice of ongoing review. To meet this tight regulatory timeline, we recommend you start early, identifying and coordinating the resources and expertise you'll need, and obtaining management support for this AA process. You may also hire technical consultants to supplement in-house expertise, or you may choose to work with your trade associations and even establish a consortium to conduct an AA collectively. There are 6 specific steps laid out for the preliminary AA. You are not required to complete them in this order. You may revisit some steps as new information becomes available. The first step is to identify how important the chemical of concern is to your product's performance requirements, and to identify the chemical's function in your product. The goal is to determine whether the chemical of concern is even necessary, and if so, to help identify potential alternatives. The second step is the identification of alternatives. This can mean more than just a drop-in chemical replacement. The SCP-AA process has a broader scope and asks you to start by considering a wide range of alternatives, like product redesign, reformulation to reduce the chemical of concern or eliminate it altogether, changes to the product or the manufacturing process to reduce exposures to the chemical and/or to reduce its adverse impacts. These are all considered alternatives in the SCP framework. Where to start? We recommend you begin with the SCP website, where you can find the priority product and its product chemical profile, which covers some alternatives. Step 3 is the identification of relevant factors. This is critical to deciding the scope of comparison and to screening for the pertinent public health and environmental impacts across the product's life cycle. This step will help assessors focus on important hazard traits, exposure pathways, life cycle segments, and associated adverse impact categories that are meaningful and practical to evaluating potential alternatives. An SCP-AA should holistically and comprehensively evaluate and compare the potential impacts between the priority product and the alternatives. Those impacts include a variety of categories: adverse public health impacts, adverse environmental impacts, environmental fate, and so on. And nested within each of these impact categories are several hazard traits or subfactors. Not every subfactor is important or relevant to your priority product and its alternatives. You'll need to refer to the regulations for more detailed breakdowns of subfactors and hazard endpoints. When you identify relevant factors, you should consider the interaction between hazard, exposure, and life cycle stages and how they work together to contribute to adverse impact categories. The SCP regulations consider a factor relevant if it makes a material contribution to any of these adverse impacts, and if there is a material difference between the priority product and its alternatives. We recommend starting with the factors related to why a priority product is prioritized. For example, if a priority product is prioritized for the developmental toxicity of a chemical of concern, and if the alternative provides a much lower developmental toxicity, then developmental toxicity is the relevant hazard endpoint and must be further analyzed. This is a scoping process to reduce the resources and time needed to complete an AA and to focus on the more important and meaningful factors that will help evaluate and compare alternatives. It's important to integrate life cycle thinking into this scoping process to avoid burden shifting from one life cycle stage to another. As shown in this diagram, all these life cycle stages need to be considered, from raw materials extraction through the manufacturing process, the use and operation, and to end-of-life disposal. But you need to focus on describing changes in the life cycle stages and associated environmental consequences and evaluate only those pertinent life cycle segments, meaning those where a material contribution and material difference occur. For example, a manufacturer may develop different formulations of a cleaning product. Because the initial analysis already addressed raw materials extraction, packaging, etc., those stages may be excluded from further analysis. Back to the steps of the preliminary AA. Step 4 is an initial evaluation and screening of alternative replacement chemicals. This step is necessary to avoid regrettable substitutes. Specifically for drop-in chemical alternatives, the preliminary AA must include an assessment of the adverse public health and environmental impacts associated with each drop-in chemical as compared to the chemical of concern. These replacement chemicals should have less of an adverse impact on public health and the environment. Another goal of this step is to identify potential alternatives that are worth investigating in more detail in the final AA. Step 5 allows consideration of additional information to give you the flexibility to apply different strategies to identify and screen out alternatives. You may consider other factors required in the final AA, like cost and technical feasibility. And these factors may help you eliminate an alternative from further consideration. Just make sure to document your rationale in your preliminary AA report, explaining why that information should be considered and why it may screen out some potential alternatives from further evaluation. Step 6 is the preparation and submission of the preliminary AA report. That includes a work plan and proposed implementation schedule for completing the final AA. We want to emphasize that it is very important that you make your decision rule, scoping, and decision-making rationale transparent. Also, make it clear how you selected a group of potentially viable alternatives to carry forward to the final AA. To submit your priority product notification and your preliminary AA report, just go to the CalSAFER website. After they're submitted, your documents will be posted and visible to the public, so if they include any trade secret information, you will also need to upload a redacted copy that excludes that information. It's that redacted copy that will be disclosed to the public. Also on the CalSAFER website, you can search for previously submitted PAA reports and use them as examples. And as you submit your report, you'll see that there are training videos for each step in the process. Those training videos are also available on the SCP Alternatives Analysis Resources webpage. That's where you can find many other resources, including the PAA report template, the DTSC AA guide, AA examples and case studies, FAQs, and other AA training videos. You can also refer directly to our SCP Regulations webpage, where you can find more information about the SCP regulations and a link to the regulations themselves. Lastly, if you have any questions, email us at saferconsumerproducts@dtsc.ca.gov. And going forward, we encourage you to join the SCP program email list or e-list to receive the latest information and updates from the department on upcoming regulations, events, and workshops. Thank you.